Hey,
Hey there.
hi there. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Oh, it is so good to see your face.
I appreciate it. I miss y'all.
Oh, I miss you too. We'll go ahead and go ahead and get right on started. In case for those who are used to coming to Creating Space, clearly I am not Sam Obeyed today. Um, this is Masa Mochizuki. But I'm really, really stoked for this opportunity, this privilege to be able to speak with Montelleo, who is with the Dean of Students at Michigan. Sorry, I'm getting all these different places confused. Mississippi State University.
Correct.
And Montellio, would you mind introducing yourself in a little bit more detail, kind of giving a little bit of background about yourself to the folks who are watching?
Sure. Hello, how are y'all? I'm outside because it's a nice day here in Mississippi. My name is Montelleo Hobley, and I serve as the coordinator for the Behavior Intervention Team in the Dean of Students Office here at Mississippi State University. I'm originally from Tampa, Florida, and that's when I kind of got involved with Community Tampa Bay. I was an Anytown delegate in 2007, then became a volunteer in 2013, I think it was, or 12, and I've volunteered with them every summer, except for this summer, but we're going to figure out how we're going to do that. Tears. And I am just excited to have the opportunity to kind of talk with you all about students and kind of what things are going with COVID-19 and all of things.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it then. Since in your role at Mississippi State, what I guess maybe kind of giving like a little background on like what your role is, like what does it generally look like, and then like how has that changed during the pandemic with COVID-19? Like what is different about what your day to day looks like?
Right. So in my current role, I work with students of concern. So I am here to help students of concern navigate different situations, whether that be mental health resources or seeking assistance overcoming barriers that might be presenting themselves for students. So that could be something as simple as a student death, or it can be a family member death, or if a student is pregnant, and kind of make sure they get the resources that they need to be successful. Additionally, I work with students in terms of food security. So that's one of the biggest parts in really looking at how we can make sure that our students have food, adequate food, healthy food that they can eat. And really, once COVID started, that's kind of where my work went to. So most of my time went to being in charge of our food pantry and really being there every day and making sure we had fresh fruit and produce for our students, as well as making sure that we had other items, feminine hygiene products. One of the things we thought about that we didn't have originally was pet supplies. So we're like, pet supplies, like this is something we really need. So think about all those different things that we really didn't think of beforehand, and how we could really, how students in this moment really need those things.
Hmm. Um, so I think we've had definitely other creating space conversations in thinking about all those sort of the different needs that are already there, but then exceeded by the pandemic and by
Right.
what's happening. Um, what what some of that you have seen at kind of those patterns, key areas of like kind of exasperation, or by COVID-19, like in what ways have students been impacted specifically during this time, and like what are some of the challenges and concerns that you've been hearing from students and encountering yourself?
Yeah, I think so. There have been a lot of different things that students have experienced, right? I mean, just thinking about the students that I serve, conversations that we have here are about rural area students and not having the access to resources to be successful. So, many institutions in K through 12 thought it was easy to just go online and do all virtual classes. But for some of my students, they live in a very rural area and they don't have access to bandwidth or any technology. So they're having to go to another location to put themselves in danger or in jeopardy of getting COVID-19. And they have to be able to do that so they can continue their work. So that's one area. I think another one that we've kind of seen it is kind of the divide, and the people who are saying, oh, this is real, and oh, this is not real. And so for our students, we as institutions, we do really good about saying, this is how we're going to fix this. This is how we're going to address this. And we're going to take guidance from CDC. But it's really hard to have our standpoint if parents are saying, hey, I don't need you. You don't have to wear a mask. Like, it's going to be okay. So it's hard for us to do our part and keep our students safe when the students also have to live by what's happening in their household. Which leads to the third thing, which is that when many of these students have had to go home, many of them, the university or the institution was their safe place, right? They were away from family, they were in school, they were able to be their true, authentic self. And so moving from that and having to go back home to where you have a very religious parent, or to a situation where you might be in abuse or whatever that might look like, that's putting you in danger. That's putting that student in a situation where we don't want them to be. So they're losing the resources of being close to us, losing the connections that we have, and all the things related to counseling and stuff like that.
I think this is actually a segue here in talking about sort of people being able to be their true and authentic self. And I think that's something that has come up in a lot of other conversations as well, is that safety factor, that our ability to choose to be in certain spaces where I can, in a different setting, in a different time, and based off of certain opportunities, resources, things like that, I can choose to be in a place that is safer, depending on my identities, depending on my social identities, and who I am, and how institutions and society views folks. How have students' social identities, how do they interact with sort of that impact of COVID-19, and also based on your own comfort level of like your own identity and your own who you are, and like how do you bring yourself to this work to meet students' needs and to be there for students, since exactly as you said, like they're looking for a safe place, they're it's like I need support, and it's like how does our identities impact how we interact with folks and how we can better support each other?
Right. Yeah, that's a loaded question because I have so many ways. Right, that's a loaded question with so many different ways to go. But I
Go
think
all the way.
right, for the starter, I would say really thinking about students and their identities. And so I think while many might say, it's the typical white versus black and race identity that's a problem, it's more of a socioeconomic aspect. Additionally, it's also the aspect of access to resources. So what students have access, or what individuals have access to healthcare, and how they can seek that out, because getting a test to know if you have COVID-19, cool, but who's going to pay for that? How am I going to get from A to B to be able to get tested and then wait for my results? And then if I do have it, what does quarantine look like? If I don't have that family support to be at home and to like have somebody go and get me the items that I need, it doesn't look the same for everybody. So that's really one of the biggest differences. I think also thinking about identities too, ones that we don't think about are looking at ability. So we have a lot of students at institutions who have accommodations, whether that be extended test time, accommodations for testing environments, accommodations for tests, like for notes from class notes to get those at an earlier time. And so a lot of our faculty have had to shift their mindset about how they are going to, one, help all students, but then two, even this special population, how they're going to be able to help the special population of students who are like, I need this, but I also need this. Mm-hmm. And so I think for people in general, and I mean, I feel like everybody has had to jump on board. We've all had to take a approach of like, let's hit the ground running, and we've kind of learned along the way. But I can definitely say for me and the things that I've done, it's been eye-opening to see like, oh, I didn't think about this. Oh, I didn't think about that. And the little things like, oh, I didn't think about our students with accommodations. Or being that I'm not from Mississippi, I never would have thought about our students who live in rural areas, right? Mm-hmm. That's a privilege that I recognize that I have from being from Florida and living in a city, a true city. And so those kind of ideas really kind of have been what I've seen over the time. I think another identity that I kind of think of too, specifically dealing with our LGBTQ plus students. So living in Mississippi and being in the Bible Belt, or the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, it's interesting because a lot of our students, like I said earlier, they come here to get away. They come here to be their true, authentic self. They come here to live life with no judgment, and they know that if they go back home 20, 30 minutes down the road, they can't go back into their family's house and be that true, authentic person that they want to be. They have to put themselves in the closet, put themselves in hiding for however long. And so it's really upsetting that they have to do that, but also they have nowhere else to go. So, one of the things that we talked about when we were looking at closing our residence halls was, okay, we're going to close residence halls, but are we closing them for a short period of time, for a long period of time? And what about those students who just can't go anywhere, So again, being able to accommodate those very specific populations or individuals who have identities where we originally did not think that there would be concern.
In hearing that, I'm thinking of how these various sort of institutions and systems are intertwined in that, it's a higher ed institution, and at the same time, it is not just about education. It is about providing food. It is about providing a safe place to live. It is about providing, in a sense, like healthcare, mental health care. Right. So there is this, in sort of navigating, like, how do we, the weight of what we are lacking in terms of our society, and the resources and the support that we're able to give. What are, I know that there's a lot of places that are starting to open back up. There's not necessarily a clear-cut plan. And so I know that institutions are sort of taking it on themselves to navigate what does that look like, based off of the populations that they serve, and the people in their communities. What does that look like for you all over there? Like, what does sort of opening back up or this process of navigating sort of this in-between space look like for you all? And what are some of the long-term concerns of students kind of going into this process and into that, navigating that gray area, not just for the seniors who are graduating and who by their senior year around this time, but then students returning to school, coming back and continuing to navigate this space.
That's very interesting that you asked that, because we actually just started going back to work yesterday. So yesterday was our official roll back into the office day, and it was one where it was like, trickle back in as you need to, get things you need to get done. If you can continue to work from home, continue to work from home. But majority of the people in my office, my colleagues, have all come back to work, and we are working in the office. I would say as a university, we have really taken steps to make sure that we are having the students, faculty, and staff and their safety as the main focal point. And so our university administration has been very, very, very aware, and they've been very timely with sending out information related to how we're moving forward. So some things that we're looking at is abbreviated academic calendars, where we might start earlier in the semester and end earlier. Hybrid classes, so typical classes that will be in person, moving those to being online. Also allowing for smaller classroom sizes. So, a lot of people know that English is always one of those big classrooms, and biology is one of those big classes of 100. So really cutting that number down so we can still continue to practice social distancing and help to, lower the number of cases that we see per day. I know in our residence halls, which is on campus living for our students, they're being very, very cautious of how they place students. And we've also looked at holding a residence hall for the use of quarantined students. So in the event that we have a quarantined student who lives on campus, they can move to that space and still be successful, have everything that they need. And I think the other thing I think about too, for as a university, how we've kind of moved in that direction is really just embracing the fact of these are ever evolving times. I think one of the things that people have been saying since this first started is unprecedented. And I'm like, I hate that word. I'm tired of the word unprecedented. Put it in the back, throw it away. But really, we've recognized that it is true times where we are just going with the flow and things. Yeah. And recognizing this is a very fluid situation, and every day we learn something new. And so with learning something new comes a new approach, and how we will interact with students, how we interact with faculty and staff. And then I was getting ready to talk a little bit about So those students, like those seniors who miss their opportunity to graduate, we have to consider when can we do those graduations to really celebrate those students, because we were able to celebrate them online, but we want to celebrate them in person because that's an achievement. Obtaining a degree is a real achievement, and so it has a lot to carry with it. And then thinking about our students who are returning, so how can we make sure our campus experience is really good for those students? So for our incoming freshmen, how are we ensuring that they fall in love with campus while still experiencing the social distance, not putting them in harm's risk of getting to campus? How can we make sure that their sophomore, junior, and senior experience is still going to be the best experience it can be, while also trying to maintain a level of social distancing and trying to make sure that we are doing all we can process as like disorderly conduct or misconduct kind of thing. So there are ways for institutions to implement it, but again, it's really the buy-in from the individual.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm with you.
I fiddled with my settings. How's it looking on your end? Are you able to hear me and everything?
I can hear and see you.
Fantastic. Okay. Third time's a charm. So let's do this.
I kind of rounded up by saying, we have to just be a community of support and really understanding that this takes a team effort to make sure that we can ensure that our students have somewhat of a normal academic year. And so we have to make sure that we can give them normacy. And so what does that look like? And how can we make that happen while still being very aware and very cautious of COVID-19?
So I think, with that, right, like there is that sort of sense of like going with, there's a lot of different things happening. There's a lot of navigating of trying, like you said, some sense of normalcy in the midst of this pandemic. And then at the same time, knowing that, this is all happening within a broader context of like systemic failures. So said at the beginning that, clearly like there's a certain amount of like, we don't have a larger national or statewide plan a lot of times that are, or depending on states, but then it ends up falling to institutions, it falls to individuals. And we know that COVID-19 is disproportionately impacting Black folks. And there is systemic inequity in a lot of the things that are happening. That is the context for also what is currently happening as protests for Black Lives Matter, springing up all around the country and is being sustained all across the country. So not saying that the question of what does normalcy look like is always relative, and at the same time, in the context of where you are right now at Mississippi State, what does anti-Black racism sort of look like in terms of where you see it manifesting in the world or in students' lives, and how are students navigating that and responding to that? There's a lot there in that question, but
I'm getting the picture. You like loaded questions.
Yeah.
So I think it's a tricky place to be, because we have this conversation about freedom of speech. What does freedom of speech look like, and how do we define freedom of speech versus hate speech? And that's really the higher education conversations right now. I don't know if you've been seeing on Twitter, but there are certain individuals on Twitter who will post something that might have a racist statement to it, or might refer to Black people as the N-word, and then very quickly that's getting screenshotted and shared and retweeted, and now institutions are saying, hey, we're pulling that person's admission to the institution. That's really hard for an institution to make that decision because there are other legal ramifications related to that, right? And so it's always interesting coming into the institution as a freshman, no matter where you're coming from. You're going to have to learn some culture shifts and some things like that. And you might come in having a social justice level of 0, or you can come in having a social justice level of 10. But we have to recognize that the one who's at 0 and the one who's at 10 are in two different places, and they might end up being roommates, might be classmates, could be lab partners. So how are we going to make that bridge and that connection to understand, this is who I am and this is who you are? And so I think we've talked a lot about like empathy and really sympathizing and understanding like, wow, I'm not going, like, I don't understand this experience because you're not a person of color, so you don't understand this experience, but you can only imagine what it's like. You know what I mean? How do you show your support for that individual, and how do you show support for that group, while also trying to make sure that you are still in a way learning and educating yourself along the way? So I think that's one of the biggest parts. I think on a personal level, for me, it's been really hard to navigate that, because as an employee of the institution, the public institution, that I have to be very neutral, right? So I have to be very neutral, and on my personal platforms I can post whatever I want, but I'm very neutral with my students, because I recognize that I have students that I love on both sides of the table. I have students that I love who are far left, some that are far right, some that are in the between, some who they float back and forth on the spectrum. But I love them each and all individually for what they bring to the table, what they do, and how they contribute. And so I have to be aware of that, and I have to make sure that when conversations come up with students who are in different places, I have to be that conduit, that middle piece to bridge them and help them understand, like, well, here's where this person's coming from, here's where this person's coming from. And that's very hard for me, because I always want to, jump out and give my opinion and put my values into it. But I've had to kind of hold back and put those into a box and restrain those for the betterment and for the development of the students. So that way I'm not forcing my ideas on them, because I want them to be able to develop their own ideas. And things like that. And the last thing I'll say, and I find it very interesting. So one thing that our Dean of Students always talks about is like activism and cause and protesting. And so like one of the things that I always say that I support is like students being young individuals and having the power. And so having the power to protest, having the power to organize a march, you are doing the work. You are putting in the time and effort. You are making a difference. You might not see it now, but you are understanding that you are standing in the way and you are doing something. So a lot of times at public institutions, we have other groups that might come to campus, and they might have some hate speech, or it might be yelling things from the Bible, whatever it looks like. And some of our students will sit there and kind of go back and forth and banter with them. Others will walk right past them. Some will entertain them. Some will talk to them and be friends with them. But we have some students who have thought about it and said, oh, well, if they're going to do that, I'm going to do this. And so while they're over here saying all the things negative about not being in love with the Bible, not being this, not being that, pure white, whatever it might be, we have other students on this other side who are saying all the other things, who are saying how much Black life matters, who are saying how much LGBTQ Black life matters, how much a trans life matters. And so it's really powerful to see that piece. And so that's where I enjoy being that, like I said, that bridge or that conduit, but also just still recognizing that I have to remember to take my step back and know when I need to process what I have going on, to make sure that I don't spill that out into others.
So that's super challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super challenging, but I think it's a part of the work. Yeah. I feel like in the field of higher education, whether you are in a faculty or a staff position, it is what it is. Students come to higher education, come to a college or university to learn and gain experiences, and we oftentimes will have people that we don't agree with, right? And we oftentimes can have conversations on both ends of the table, and there's just some things that you can just deny those things. So some things that we know racism is bad. We all know, we know racism is bad. And if you don't know that racism is bad, let's talk about that. But if you don't know why, or if you don't know how it's impacting this individual person or this group, that's something that can be educated. That's something where we can take some time to have a conversation about it. You might know this, but you don't know this.
In that sort of education piece, and I think at Community Tampa Bay, we're doing a series, a Let's Talk About Racism series, because of the fact that that burden of having those conversations a lot of times falls on people of color, and in regards to anti-Black racism, often falls on Black folks. And so I know that you're in that particular position, right? Because you're with the institution of navigating that space, like you said, of neutrality, while at the same time and cultivating youth voice in that process. in what ways have you seen students coming together, organizing, or like in basically navigating whatever roles that they can in order to advocate and also for themselves, but then also ally with each other in order to support these causes, so that people aren't drained, that you know, it's maybe potentially less on you to be the one who is negotiating these conversations all the time. What are some of the systems of support that students are creating together?
So I would say from this perspective of our students, what they've kind of done to create that system of support is really about first speaking out. So a lot of them have posted statements saying we condone X, Y, and Z, and we support and we are stand by diversity, inclusion, and engagement, whatever that might look like. And now we're having conversations with the students to say that's great and all, but in that letter, let's talk about some action steps. Let's talk about some action steps to maybe why your executive board contains 5 people and consists of 5 people, and the 5 people are all white men. You know, let's talk about that. You say you want diversity, but if your entire organization's leadership is all white or all male or all female on the board, how far are we going to get? If there's not a voice at the table, you can put out a message and you can ask the people on the team, hey, how do you feel about this message? But that message means nothing if you don't have action steps behind it. And so I can say that all of our organizations on campus, big ones and small ones, have all put out very, very positive statements in support of what's happening and in support of our students and their fellow colleagues and peers. But now we are asking the question of what are you going to do and what does that look like? You know, what action steps can you take within your specific organization to ensure that you are doing a just job and making sure that students are able to come and join this organization if they want to? Are you intentionally reaching out to students of color? Are you intentionally spending time with students of color? What are you doing to make yourself uncomfortable to be in a space where you can help somebody else and you can then broaden your horizons and have more individuals be a part of the organization? Are you there?
Uh-oh. Montelleo, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, if
yes.
You can hear me.
Yes. Yes, I can hear you. I don't know what happened now.
Uh-oh.
There it is. I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, the connection is better now. All right. So I think before I cut out just a little bit there, I think we saw some hearts in the chat, some support for exactly what you were saying of like, it's not enough to put out these statements. We bore that there is action behind these statements, like, you know, the accountability there of there's a lot of, I think actually I just heard recently a term of woke washing is, I think, the term I heard somebody say. Is that have you heard this? I just
I've heard the
term.
I've heard the term. I am still investigating the term because I am not the expert on the term, but I have heard that term and I love that term. Some of my friends who are very well into it, they are educating me on it. But yes, it's a thing.
To put sort of your money and your actions and your everything else where your mouth and where your words are. So
right, especially knowing that we have some organizations. So knowing that we have some organizations on our campus that are powerful, you know, they have X amount of thousands of dollars, and where are they putting that money into? You know, I mean, I love the idea of putting money into philanthropy and putting money into cancer research and autism and things like that. But I mean, can we put money in other places? And these other places that should get money, how can we support them? What does that look like? Are we volunteering in those areas? Are we working to help individuals who are leaving the jail system to find a better way to help themselves and get a better life? What are we doing to make sure that we are taking care of our neighbor?
Mm, mm, heard. Um, so I know that the disconnection is rough a little bit, which is the reason why I'm struggling a little bit at times. So
Okay,
I
we're doing
apologize, and I
great.
appreciate your patience there. Um, I think as we're continuing to move forward in all of our respective communities, for you, what are some of your kind of what are you looking ahead to in terms of like what are your sort of hopes, next steps in terms of what you see in the coming year, and any final thoughts or takeaway messages for folks who are watching this, or things that you want to re-emphasize as key things that we need to really think about when we're thinking about the institutions, and the responsibilities that we have as individuals
Mm-hmm.
within institutions and institutions themselves in making sure that we are supporting one another and looking out for each other during this time, and for all people, all identities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. From the couple of different perspectives, one being COVID-19 perspective, I definitely think that we still have a long way ahead of us. We still have a long way ahead of us before we are at a place where this is not impacting society in the way it is. You know, this is not killing individuals. Individuals aren't getting sick. Individuals aren't having to shelter in place or quarantine. So for COVID, I think this is something where, and this is my personal opinion, where it's something where we're going to have to be able to kind of like live with it, you know, and it's going to be like the next kind of flu kind of thing. Once we can figure out how to maintain it and tame it, and it's going to be something we're going to be very active about. I think it, you know, I traveled this past week and I thought it was so interesting because when so I traveled from Mississippi over to Utah. When I was doing that travel, I got onto the plane, and as I was stepping onto the plane, they handed me a wet wipe, and I sat down and I wiped my hands and wiped the seat off. And then when you sit down and the plane takes off, and they come by and bring you snacks, and the snacks are in a pre-made bag with the little hand sanitizer thing in there. And I was like, oh, this is cute. And I put it on, I eat my snack, and they bring me another wet wipe, and I'm getting ready to get off the plane, and I get off the plane. Cool. Why weren't we doing that before? Like, why can't we not be clean and sanitary from day one? Why are we doing that now? And are these practices that we are going to continue, or are these practices that we're doing in the moment? So I think that's where I'm like, I'm really shook about this one. From the perspective of Black Lives Matters, Black Lives Matter, excuse me, I feel that we also have a long way to come. I feel that with the recent incidents and recent people who have been killed, George Floyd and others, I feel like now people are finally starting to get it. And I don't know if it's because they might have said, some people might see George as a safe black or whatever. They couldn't paint the picture of him having a negative image. And so maybe that's why people are behind it. But it's every day we're still seeing it. You know, every day we continue to see a black person that's dying. And so I don't know what it's going to take for people to realize and recognize that that we've got to do more. You know, that we've got to do more. And I use the term safe black because I always talk about like in my institution, in my office, I recognize that I'm the only person of color in my office. I recognize when I walk down the street or when I walk through Kroger that I get different interactions than my student who has dreads. I get different interactions than my student who might have golds in his mouth, my student who might have a do-rag on or whatever that might be. I get different interactions, and I recognize the fact that people look at me and say, oh, I'm not scared of him at all. But for my students, they're gonna look away. For my students, they're gonna follow them. And so that's what's upsetting. That's just what's upsetting, is that the fact that you can look at somebody and make that judgment, make that decision and say, oh, well, I mean, they must have did something wrong for the police to have to kill him. But then you look at me like, oh no, there's no way you could have killed that boy. That man was so safe. Oh, Montelleo was so nice. He always smiled. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we have to be able to respect, and we have to be able to realize that Black Lives Matter regardless of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there is no conditional statement for that.
Right.
And these kids, these are your students.
Yeah. I mean, from
So,
the perspective of students, I mean, even from the perspective of being a father, like I hope to be a father one day, and I don't want to have to. I will have the conversation, but I don't want to have the conversation so early on. I don't want my
yeah.
child to have to go to school, and in second grade we're already talking about what racism is. You know what I mean? I don't want him to have to experience that so young. I want him to be able to go on with life, and maybe one incident might come up where we're talking about that. I want him to be able to be exposed to very diverse individuals and learning different languages and interacting with different peoples and cultures. I don't want my child to be sheltered. And I think if we can all have that mindset of like, how can we open up and make sure that others are not being sheltered and not living in this little safe bubble, we can recognize and realize that there's so many different people and there's so many different things that are around this world and that are in this space, and we can all learn something from them.
Well, thank you, Montelleo. This is all I see in the chat here. I'm just looking really quickly in the chat. I think Lori says, "Well put, Monty." So definitely, everything that you're saying is absolutely truth, resonating with a lot of folks. I know it's resonating, and it's this is real stuff that we have, like you said, we're gonna have to come to terms with this and deal with this, and this is a long road ahead. So
Yeah, I think that, and I think one of the other things I would say in like ending is using our platform and recognizing the privilege that we have in our platform. So for the superstar celebrities, how are you using your platform to speak? How are you using your dollars to help? How are you helping your fans to understand the importance of what's going on? You know, for institutions, putting out that message, like I said, cool, great. But what are the steps? You know, even for small businesses, the same thing. You know, right now, I know we're talking a lot about these very individual or companies, maybe like McDonald's, Wendy's, or whatever, and how they're supporting different ways, right? And so we can be very smart about how we spend our money and where it goes. We have to think about also how can we get that company to understand that this is bigger than us. This is bigger than them. This is a thing that you still there? I'm here.
okay.
I'm here.
Now,
Good to go.
okay. So we are gonna. I feel like your parting words. We're gonna end on that. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and to chat and share your experiences, your wisdom, and your call to action. And we are, I think, for in terms of platform purposes, can people do? Do you have a public platform that people can follow you and watch you, learn more about you, say something to the people in terms of
Yeah,
where they
yeah,
can.
definitely. So you can find me on Instagram, oh my Montelleo, OMG it's Montelleo, Twitter as well, OMG it's Montelleo, oh my Montelleo. You can follow me, or you can follow my amazing dog. His name is Swayze, and it's Mr. Sway Your Girl. So always keep in touch. I love having these conversations, and I'm definitely willing to have them with people. And I know that if I don't want to have the conversation, I have plenty of white friends that will have the conversation for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Montelleo. Really, really appreciate it. Follow Montelleo, and thank you so much. We'll definitely catch up again soon.
Yes. Talk to you soon.
All right, take care. Thank you
Bye.
all so much for tuning in. Um, we will definitely have this posted up on YouTube if we missed it, or if I know that the connection was coming in and out at certain points, so we'll edit it down and put it on YouTube. Also, in the comments in the chat, we will include link to the survey. So if you are watching this, go ahead and fill out the survey, give some feedback.